Hello and welcome to Timm's BMW repairs and information. Well, it's a lovely day, but I'm afraid we're not going out again. Today we're going to have a look at the exterior lights and which ones you can use LEDs in if you want to, and any problems you might have with them. Right, I think what we'll do to start with, we'll actually have a look at the lights, and I'll show you what I've got in my car from the experience of trying different things. Side park lights are the standard 5-watt tungsten. If you use LEDs, they get much too bright. Brake lights, they're 21-watt tungsten, and if you try and put LEDs in there on a V8, the cruise control stops working. Fog lights, they're 21-watt tungsten as well. But the reverse lights and the indicators, I'm using LEDs, and they work really well, and I like the digital way they switch on and off. But you can only use them on the back, because if you use them anywhere else, the resistance is just much too high, and then you'll get sped up indicators, and that's never a great look. So I've got LEDs fitted to the indicators at the back and the reversing lights, and that's about it. The rest I've left as standard. Obviously the side lights, I've got LEDs, and I'll explain how we use those, but I love those, they're much better. Low beams and fogs, I'm still using H1 Osram light breakers because of their beam pattern. If you use LEDs, then you dazzle oncoming drivers, and it gives you that Hyundai look, i.e. a really cheap car with LEDs stuck in it. But the main beams on both the pop-up lights and the FTPs are LEDs, and they're fantastic. They bung out a huge amount of light, and the spill on main beams isn't so much of a problem, and you can use them as flashers. There I'm using them there to flash oncoming vehicles, and like the indicators, are very digital. They come straight on and they go straight back off again. And when you've got the pop-up lights on, obviously the main beams and the FTPs flash at the same time, and they're both digital as well. They switch on quickly and go straight back off again. So yeah, I much prefer to use LEDs for the main beams, but don't use them in the low beams and the fog lights because of the light spill. I really don't want to dazzle oncoming drivers. Indicators, they're 21-watt tungsten. As explained, you can only change one to an LED, and you can choose the front or the back, but it's downright easier to fit them in the back than it is the front, because there isn't much room in the indicating spaces. Right, so this is dip beams on, and then the fog lights and the main beams, and you can see how much light it bungs out. It bungs out a huge amount of light. The fog lights, as well as the dip beams, have a great cut-off pattern, so you don't dazzle oncoming drivers at all. So I leave the fog lights on all the time, obviously in the dark. But the main beam being LEDs, they're fast to switch on, and they've bung out a huge amount of light, and oncoming traffic, switch off. Don't have any problems with drivers flashing me for having the fog lights on, because they got such a good beam pattern. But no, I really love LEDs as main beams because they're quick and they're powerful, and they really bung out a lot of light. Yeah, very useful they are. Right, to quickly sum up things, using LEDs without adding resistors, right, those massive great resistors you have to strap to places. Indicators, you can get replacing one, and that's fine. Side tail, don't do it, they're just too bright. Brake lights, cruise control stops working on the V8s. Rear fog lights, difficult to make error free, and they're blindingly bright, so again, don't use those. Front side lights, need a PTC device, and explain how to do that. Dipped low beams, the LEDs give a poor pattern and dazzle oncoming drivers, same as the fog lights. But the main beams, the FTP and the pop-ups, fantastic with LEDs. They bung out so much light. The one I forgot to talk about was the number plate lights, license plate lights, which I show you how to do on my website, but they don't last long. They get so hot that the LEDs themselves fail. You have to solder an LED bulb to a standard what they call festoon bulb, and the thing gets so hot. Right, this is how you get the FTPs out. You move the inner side first, squeak it away up and down a bit until it pops out, and then pop out the other side, because what we don't want to break is the lugs on the FTPs. And after a few years they go quite brittle and they do snap off. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth doing this work just to stick LEDs in when I might damage my FTPs? And the general consensus is no, I wouldn't bother. But I did buy new ones to actually do the tests on. So this is how you get it out. You have to pull the side sticks out straight, otherwise you damage them. And then you undo the connector, which you sort of rest on. You rest the light on your knee and turn it around and do it. It's a bit fiddly, but there you go. This is how you get the cover off the back of the main beams on the FTPs with a screwdriver. I've got an LED in that one. This isn't actually the one from my car. It's editing for you. I've got one of my old ones just to show you what's in there. And there's a 21 watt tungsten, and there's an LED. This is one of the LED units that I use for the FTP side lights, and it's got a couple of LEDs that face forward and 4 of them that face the side, and it takes a reasonable amount of current, 700 milliamps, which is around about 8.4 watts, which is why it can manage to fool the lamp control module into thinking that there's a proper tungsten bulb in there. That's when it's warm tested, of course, not when it's cold tested, and it fails the cold test. So that's why it's got this little fella on the back, which is a PTC device, a positive temperature coefficient resistor, and they're actually used in electronics as fuses. So they pass current until the current exceeds a certain amount, and then they go open circuit. And that's covered on my website, including putting this bit of wire between the two contacts. For the FTP main beams, I'm actually using LEDs. Of course, in the UK, our FTP are main beams, but there's only one sort of type of LED that fits, which is this one. And the reason for that is very short before it reaches the braid, and also the wire actually comes out of the side of it rather than out of the top, because that then gets in the way. And the hard bit is actually getting the braid squished down carefully enough so that it doesn't get compressed when you put the rear cover on, because if it gets compressed, that means you can't adjust the beam throw, and you have to do that once the LEDs are put in. Second problem with LEDs is that the way they're designed is they actually go that way up, and that means that all the light goes up and all the light goes down, and none of it goes sideways. And due to the shape of the FTP main beam, you want it to go sideways. So these have to be modified to knock a lump out of them so that they can actually go 90 degrees turn, so they actually go in that way rather than up and down. And they do produce a reasonable amount of light as well. I mean, the reflectors are good on these, on the FTPs. So yeah, you can see why you have to have the LEDs left and right, because the reflector is very wide but actually has no height at all, and you can see that any light that went up and down doesn't get far. In fact, it sort of points up at squirrels and points down at slugs if you have it stuck in so the LEDs are up and down. Whereas this direction, then they bung out a useful amount of light, and they're quite useful. They really do throw the light quite a long way down the road. But I will warn you that it's quite fiddly to do, and before I did it, I bought brand new FTPs and then worked on the old ones rather than damage brand new FTPs. But once I'd worked out how to do it, then I've sort of moved everything onto the new FTP. So this is one of the old ones I took out of my car, and you can see it's actually still got both of the lugs on it, and that's very unusual. A bit of glue going on there, but the other one of the pair that I took out didn't have any lugs on at all. And that's one of the things you've got to decide when you look at an FTP and say, I would like an LED on there, is can you afford for these lugs to drop off? And they do on older cars. They drop off quite easily as well. On the other side, I ended up with two bits of metal, top and bottom, because it didn't have any lugs at all. And so the screws screwed into these bits of metal and actually pushed against here and held the FTP in. but obviously I've got brand new ones in there now. So that's one thing you've got to decide, whether you want to risk damaging the FTP when you fiddle with them. Okay, putting them back in. Most important bits, just don't put a stress on anything. So guide the pegs on into the apertures in the wing, and then just feel it, make sure it's going in straight. It's a long lever, so you can easily snap off those pegs. So there you go, get it in, slide it in, make sure there's no pressure on it, and also make sure there's no pressure on the fixing lugs. I've oiled the screws so they go in a lot easier. I know it's a lot of faffing about, but it does help save those lugs because they can be brittle. Should be okay on a new FTP, of course. Okay, screws in, and also I'll lubricate the fixing lugs on the front grills just to help them slide in a bit easier. So a bit of light oil, and that will evaporate off pretty quickly. On all the lugs, on all 4 of the lugs, any excess oil, wipe them on the grill itself. It darkens them down for a while, makes them look better just for a few weeks. Okay, so a bit of oil on there, and the same way as getting it out, you sort of wiggle it up and down a bit to slide the fixing lugs into the apertures, starting with the center side towards the middle. Get that one in first, wiggle it up and down, there we go, squeaks away, and then put the inner one in, sorry, the FTP side one in. That's it, done. Right, have a quick look at the rear lights. Carpets off, and they're in little rotational holders, and I'll show you what I mean. They just need to be turned anti-clockwise very slightly to get them out, and although I managed to get it out and back in very successfully very quickly, I don't usually, they take a while to get in and out, so they just don't seem to go back in, but eventually they sort of go click and they're in. And don't forget the centre brake light, which is in the parcel shelf right up there. Same rotational fixing, so no problem there. And the boot lid lights are accessed by undoing 1/4 turn screw, which I'm undoing there, and 1 popper. Just give it a sharp pull, and you can get access to all 3 bulbs, and also the festoon bulb, which is used for the boot light. And just for completeness sake, changing the bulbs on the pop-up lights, remove the single posi drive screw, move the cover forward, and you'll find 2 covers under there, the big ones for the dip beam and the fog, the other one for the main beam. And they're a bit fiddly to get out, but they do fine. Well, thanks very much for watching again. This was the 3rd part of the series. Another one coming up very soon.